What's up, guys? This is Ian here, coach of your Ladner Lanturn, bringing you guys our Nimbasa City League Season 2 draft analysis for your Ladner Lanturn. Um, there are a few notes that I want to talk about before we sort of get into this. This is my league, obviously. I commissioned this league, and I want to give a huge shout out to Jed for making this wonderful league logo for us. You can see it on the right-hand side of the screen there. It's a picture of Elisa above Nimbasa City, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. Gives off a really cool vibe. The next was that we are bringing 12 coaches into this league, again, just like Season 1. We have a few returning coaches. We have Monster, Corona, Nacho, Cade, Matt, Magic, myself, and Jed. So I think that's 7, maybe? And then we have some new coaches. We have Phil, we have Ben, we have Dom, we have Jay. So 4 new coaches. I can't exactly remember the math on that. But I want to welcome everyone to the new season, and I think it's pretty cool that we're getting back into the NCL after um, a fairly disappointing finish for us. I wouldn't say it was super disappointing because, you know, we were the runners-up. I think that's pretty cool that we even came top 2. We had a really balanced season. I really loved my team from last season, and I was hoping to maybe get some pieces from my team last season onto my team this season. I wasn't sure if I could get the whole thing. Probably not, right? But that was kind of my hope. I did randomize the draft order, and in the original randomization, we were the 3rd overall pick. I ended up trading that for 10th overall to Nacho and the Detroit Terravolts because I was not sure what I wanted to grab, and so I figured getting 10th is just the other side of the wheel in the same position, and I would just be able to sort of wing it and figure out what I wanted to get from there. As we moved through round 1, there were a few things that I was looking at that went actually. Daniel actually picked Zeraora 2nd overall. Nacho ended up picking Celesteela 3rd overall. And then the only other thing that I was really looking at intently was Lander's Therian, which I'd never tried before, and Magic ended up taking it 1 pick right before me. So, you know, not the greatest, not the greatest overall there, but we did end up grabbing something that I've used very briefly in the past, and if you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I had this for UPBA Season 2, which ended up failing quite heavily right after Week 2, but we used it pretty well, I think, in the 2 matches that we had it. We were undefeated technically in that season. So first pick, I ended up grabbing Mew. Same nickname as in UPBA, Snowcone. If you don't know about NCL and me, I make all of my mons shiny, so expect everything to be shiny this entire season. That's just kind of how I play. That's just how I play in NCL, is I only use shinies. Sometimes in most other leagues I don't do that. It depends on kind of how I want the nickname to be and how I want them to look. Yeah, so Mew is base 100 stats all across the board. It only has the ability to synchronize. It's the most versatile mon in Draft League. Sort of just run through some moves here that it gets. It's pretty impressive. It can learn every single TM move in the game, and it gets a ton of move tutor moves. Right off the bat, we got ourselves a Defogger and a U-turner. It also gets Volt Switch as well, so that's worthy to note. It gets a ton of cool TM moves, you know, Earthquake. It gets some good setup in things like Calm Mind, Nasty Plot, Swords Dance. Workup, I believe it gets as well. It gets Workup, I think. It's not on the recommended moves. It gets things like Whirlwind. I believe it gets Roar as well. Will-O-Wisp for support moves. Taunt, Tailwind, Synthesis now. Oh my goodness, that's disgusting. It's a Stealth Rocker. It gets Reliable Recovery and Soft Boiled. I think it gets Wish as well. No, it doesn't get Wish. It's a knockoff user now. Nature Power, Nightshade is a great utility move. Things like Overheat, Poison. I mean, it gets like a ton of really good moves. And then even in the not so good moves, it gets things like Charge Beam, which could be really cool. There's a few other things on here. Dynamic Punch is really neat. I know I saw Geo use a Focus Punch Mew set, which was really cool actually. Endure, Fly. We do allow everything to use Z moves, so in this format, I think that Mew fits this really, really well. Obviously, I can't use one-hit KO moves, but it does get things like Fissure, Horn Drill. Incinerate is kind of neat. Iron Defense setup, Amnesia, Iron Defense. I've seen that brought a few times actually. There's no stat pass in this, so it's not as relevant, but there you go. Reflect type, it can play around with reflect type things. Rock Tomb for speed control. It gets self-destruct and explosion. I know I definitely saw Geo use an explosion set before. Teleport's completely worthless. I don't even know why I mentioned that. Transform is really cool, especially like a Z transform set is really neat. And things like Zap Cannon, it does get priority in Vacuum Wave. I want to say that's the only priority move it gets as I'm looking through here. Vacuum Wave I think is the only one. I don't think it gets Quick Attack or anything along those lines. Q, no, it doesn't get any, well, it gets Quash. Yeah, so I think it only gets Vacuum Wave for priority, but besides that, it gets a wide variety of moves, and it's got a very balanced stat total, so it ends up working out. Oh, actually, it gets Aurora Veil. That's pretty neat as well. Bulk Up, I totally forgot about Bulk Up. So, you know, Mew is a very versatile Pokemon. It gives us a great Defogger right off the bat, and a Stealth Rock Setter right off the bat, Momentum right off the bat. I think that's really cool. It gets Baton Pass as well as U-Turn and Volt Switch, so that's really neat. I play for Momentum quite a bit. That's kind of my play style, so we'll see how it goes. Also, it gets Dragon Tail for phasing as well, Drain Punch, things like that. I'm a huge fan of Mew, and I was a really big fan of using it in UPBA Season 2, and I didn't end up getting to use it that much, unfortunately, because of because of, you know, how the season went. I think that was going to be a really successful season for me, and I actually tried to draft a few things. This team is a lot of things that I've used before, but sort of fitting into one playstyle, and then there's a few things that I've never used before on this team as well, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, so heading into round 2, Nacho made a comment, "Oh no, the fairies are going to start to go. Better grab your fairies quickly," and I believed him. So I ended up grabbing my fairy round 2 after Jay took Clefable in round 1. And so the third pick of round 2 we grabbed was Sylveon. I've used Sylveon quite a few times in the past. I don't believe I've ever used Sylveon in a league that I've uploaded, though. I've used Sylveon in DBA Season 1, which I was considering uploading. I've used it in LATE Season 2. What else have I used it? EPTL Season 2. That might be it, just the 3. I thought I used it in 4, though, so I'm not entirely sure on that, but I've loved using Sylveon. I think it's one of my favorite mons to use in the format. Just as a fairy as well, I think it's not necessarily that versatile because you're either running it defensive or offensive, but I think just that in itself is enough for me. Sylveon is another Baton Pass user. You're not really going to see it run Cute Charm, but there's an option there. It's Penny. I always name my Sylveons Penny after Penny Alexiak. It's got really good special stats, special bulk, and special offense. It's a little bit slow at base 60, but you know, we're sort of going to make up for that a little bit later on in the draft. Getting a really bulky fairy was really cool, and I sort of have a dedicated special wall if I need it at this point as well. Sylveon's another Heal Beller. I think Mew gets Heal Bell. Let me just double check that Mew gets Heal Bell. Mew does get Heal Bell. I don't know if I wrote that on the doc, but Mew gets Heal Bell as well as Sylveon, so I have 2 Clerics now as well. I have another Calm Mind Setup Sweeper. I believe it gets Work Up as well. A Hyper Voice user, which is really cool because then it goes through Sub. So now Sub isn't as threatening against my team because I have a Hyper Voice user. Sylveon is another, it's a Wish Passer as well, which is really cool into something like Mew. Setup Mew is kind of a big thing. I was running a lot of Setup Mew on the ladder recently, and that's sort of what I've been trying to do is Wish Pass into Setup Mew. I don't know, Sylveon's a lot of utility as well as it can be a lot of special offense. Mew can be offensive both ways or defensive both ways if necessary. Obviously, it's the most versatile mon in the game. And Sylveon is definitely there. It's sitting there on the special side waiting to sort of go in and go ham. My next pick, I grabbed relatively late into round 3, but I was scared that this wasn't going to last into round 4 because I know Jed was saying he wanted to draft some stuff that he's used before, and I know he's used this before. Seems kind of counterintuitive that I'm drafting 2 fairies back to back, but personally I'm of the opinion that having more than one fairy is not a bad thing. Excuse me. I generally like to draft fairies that don't share weaknesses with each other, but I sort of had a strategy going into this draft, and that was to draft Veil. I've used Alolan Ninetales one time before in SAPL Season 3 when I took over Jay's team, actually, and we went on to lose in the first round of the playoffs in that season. But Alolan Ninetales was a ton of fun, and I love using Aurora Veil, especially on the ladder. I've been practicing with it a lot. Alolan Ninetales, you're not really going to see Snowcloak used on Alolan Ninetales because it's my Hail Setter, so if it's coming, it's bringing a Snow Warning. I can tell you that much. Although in DBA I did screw up once with my Politoed and I brought Water Absorb over Drizzle. Ended up working out for me in that game actually because my opponent prepped for rain and there was no rain to be had, so I think he ended up missing a Thunder or something like that. Anyways, Alolan Ninetales is Sophie for Sophie Turner, and we'll sort of continue with that into the next round, but it's got kind of middling stats, to be honest. Its speed is kind of the best thing that it's got going for it. It's another Heal Bell user, so I have no shortage of clerics at this point. The big thing is that Alolan Ninetales is the best Aurora Veil setter in the game. And keep in mind that Mew also gets Aurora Veil, so that's technically an option as well. It's a Calm Mind user, it's a Nasty Plot user. Freeze Dry is extremely useful on any sort of team. It's relatively frail given the stats that we have going on already, and it doesn't have the greatest special attack, which is kind of why it relies on things like, relies on things like Nasty Plot to boost its stats up a little bit. It's a really good Blizzard user. It runs Blizzard a lot because it gets 100% accurate Blizzards. I don't know, it's kind of another good utility mon, and again, I didn't want to let this slip by. I really wanted to have Alolan Ninetales be one of the cornerstones of my team as a Veil squad. You'll see at the end of the video basically that my entire team can benefit from using Aurora Veil in some way or another, and I think that's just really cool. I'm a huge fan of that, and I think I've done a really good job of drafting around Veil. This was the cornerstone of my team. This was the strategy I wanted to draft, and we sort of went with it and soared. I definitely forgot to talk about this, but you'll notice that we've got a really cool slide background there. This is also made courtesy of Jed. He did a fantastic job of this as well. I have nothing but good things to say about Jed. He's a really good friend of mine, and he does amazing graphic work. I know he says a lot of the time that he just steals stuff, but this is fantastic, and he did an amazing job. So shoutouts to Jed again for that. Round 4, I had to grab this because I knew Nacho was looking at this, and I really wanted this on my team. So sorry about this, Nacho, but I had to take this, and round 4 actually ended up being the round of bulky waters going. So I'll just sort of show you. I ended up picking Melodic, which I've used before, and in SAPL Season 4, we're naming it Turner to finish off Sophie Turner. That's kind of just the idea there. But let's just talk about the round really quickly here. So first pick of this round, Jed took Rotom Wash, that's 1. I took Melodic at 3. Magic took Kingdra at 4. Dom took Suicune at 5. At 9, Cade took Vaporeon. 10, Nacho took Toxapex. So that's 6 water types going in one round. I think this was kind of the round to take a water type or a bulky water in general. Most of them were bulky. I think only Kingdra is the only one that I would not specify as a bulky water. And shortly thereafter in round 5, Austin ended up taking Empoleon, so and we saw Ben taking Primarina in round 5 as well. So the bulky waters were sort of going as planned within a relative sphere of time. So that was kind of cool. But Melodic is a very good defensive Pokemon. It's got a really high base special defense. You'll notice so far that we've got a really good specially defensive team, and that's sort of what it ended up working out as throughout the draft, is we ended up having a lot of special bulk. So I'm relatively confident that special attackers won't have a lot of trouble, or will have a lot of trouble with us, but I'm not super confident that physical attackers won't. One cool thing about Melodic is that it's a decent coil sweeper, so that's another way that Melodic can sort of abuse Veil, as well as just being bulky in general. You'll mostly see Melodic as like a Flame Orb Marvel skill set, and its defense just goes through the roof because it gets doubled, and I don't know if I could do a direct calculation because it's not exactly double of the base 79 because it's doubled based on your investment as well, but that's kind of cool with Melodic. It's mostly seen as a utility mon, just like the rest of my mons, but it does get reliable recovery, just like Sylveon does and Mew does. So sort of my walls are coming together here with their reliable recovery, and it's coming together that I've got a relatively bulky team. Unfortunately, at this point, it's not looking like I've got a ton of physical offense, which we'll patch up with our next pick. And I don't know, there's not much I can say about Melodic outside of that. There's some really cool Magic Coat sets and Mirror Coat sets that I've seen before. It actually does get a reasonably decent physical move pool, and it's worthy to note that it can manually set up the hail if I need it to. That's kind of melodic. Round 5, this was also our first free pick. Cost me 120 points because it was a tier 2. I sort of had a strategy going in that I was going to try and take as many tier 3s as I could, but melodic was sitting there and I changed my mind and went with tier 2s instead. Up to this point, my plan had been working out so far, although my draft was looking kind of middling. A lot of stuff from my Season 1 team was gone already. Celesteela was gone, Donphan was gone, Rotom-Mo was gone, shortly thereafter, my next pick actually, and so, you know, things were starting to fall out of my hands in terms of stuff that I had drafted last season, and so I sort of just strayed away from that, and I didn't end up taking, I don't believe I actually took anything from my draft from last season. Let me just double check that. Nope, everything is brand new from last season, so we're running a completely different team. But yeah, so round 5, I ended up grabbing my dragon. You'll notice we have 2 fairies, no steel type, no dragon, and we finally picked up a water, so we're finally kind of picking up our cores here, although we do have a psychic type for the psychic fighting dark core. And I ended up picking a dragon and a fighting type that fit both of those things. I ended up picking up Kommo-o. I think this was a really cool pick for me to take in round 5. I was not expecting it to last this long, and most, if not all, of the fighting types in tier 2 were gone at this point. Nacho had picked up Buzzwole at the beginning of the round, and Kate had taken Hawlucha in round 2. I can't remember if there were any other... Oh, Conkeldurr. Phil took Conkeldurr in round 2 as well. So I don't think there were any fighting types left in tier 2 after Kommo-o was gone. I needed a fighting type, I needed a dragon type. This was pretty clutch. It doesn't have the highest base attack, but it's a fantastic Dragon Dance user. It's a great Autotomize user. Bulletproof and Soundproof are both fantastic abilities. I don't really see myself ever bringing Overcoat this season. Nobody drafted Amoonguss, nobody drafted Breloom. Those are the 2 premier Spore users. Nobody drafted Parasect, even if that was a thing. I think that's the only other thing that gets Spore even. Nobody drafted Smeargle, so there's really no application to bring Overcoat at all this season. And even so, I'd probably rather just run safety goggles with like Bulletproof or Soundproof. I can block another Hyper Voice user with my Soundproof. That's pretty cool to me. Forcing things to run Moonblast is really cool. Obviously, I drafted the only thing that would maybe be a threat to that in Sylveon, but I know Austin drafted Mega Altaria, which is another Hyper Voice user, and Mega Gardevoir is still on the board. No one can actually take Mega Gardevoir because you're not allowed to drop Megas in this league, but there you go. Bulletproof is a solid ability, blocking things like Shadow Ball. I think it blocks Seed Bomb, if I'm not mistaken, or Bullet Seed or something like that. Definitely one of the grass attacks for sure. There's actually a long list of moves that are blocked by Bulletproof. I'm definitely going to do a lot more research into that before a week 1 battle for sure. Yeah, Kommo-o's got really good base defense as well, which is kind of cool. So we were sort of heavy on the special defense side, and now we've got a decent physical wall as well. It's another Stealth Rocker besides Mew, which I think fills out the team relatively nicely, although neither of them I'd really love to be running Stealth Rocks on every week. And you'll notice that's sort of a trend with the Stealth Rockers that we draft. We do take quite a few more Stealth Rockers, but that is a trend for what we've drafted. Kommo-o is a decent mixed attacker, just like Mew is, which I'm a big fan of as well. It can be run in a variety of different ways. I'm a big fan of Kommo-o. You'll notice our speed tiers are kind of, in between each other now. We've got Melodic at 81, Kommo-o at 85. Not horrible, but not great. We're nicknaming it Rebar. Recently, I've been watching through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the entire timeline, and I was watching through Agent Carter, and there's a portion of Agent Carter. If you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil it for you, don't worry, but if you have seen it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where Rebar comes into play, and I thought that was kind of a neat nickname idea for a Kommo-o, based on the scales and stuff like that. I think that its tail kind of looks like a Rebar, like a pipe of Rebar. I don't know what you would call it, a pipe of Rebar? A stick of Rebar? I don't know. It's Rebar. It's steel, right? So, anyways, that's Kommo-o's nickname. Heading into round 6, I had an electric type that I wanted to grab. I really wanted Zeraora, but I ended up grabbing an electric and fire type that fit my team, gave me the fire typing that I needed, and an electric type that was useful. I also wanted more of a pivot option. I don't have the best pivots at this point. It's like Mew and Sylveon. So round 6, we ended up grabbing Rotom-Heat. I've used Rotom-Heat before. I actually did upload LET Season 1 back when the videos were being recorded for that league. I don't have the capabilities of recording a Wi-Fi league at this point, so I'm just part of that Wi-Fi league and I don't record battles anymore. But in Season 1, we had Rotom-Heat. I was a huge fan of Rotom-Heat. It was so much fun to use on that team. I've used a few different Rotom forms now. I've used Rotom-Heat before. I've used Rotom Wash in AABL. We're using it currently, and I used Rotom-Mow in last season of NCL. And I actually had Rotom Frost for one game of Mount Silver Season 3, and I ended up dropping it because I'm just not a huge fan of Rotom Frost's weaknesses. Although having Bolt Beam Stab is just really cool. The problem with it is that it relies on Blizzard, and I'm not a fan of super inaccurate moves. That's kind of one of the problems I have with Rotom Wash, is that you have to rely on Hydro Pump as your only water stab, whereas things like Leaf Storm and Overheat are just a lot more consistent. So we grabbed Rotom-Heat. It's a great mixed defensive wall. It's another special attacker, unfortunately, but it's also a Levitate user. I didn't have a ground weakness at this point, but Levitate covers Rotom-Heat's 4x ground weakness, and you'll notice that ground is kind of a big thing against my team. I don't end up drafting... No, sorry, ground isn't that big of a thing, but it's also an electric resist, which I kind of have in Kommo-o as well, but it's sketchy. I've nicknamed Rotom Dyrus because he didn't try. He almost successfully burnt down the TSM house with a microwave. It's pretty funny story. I explained it all in my LT Season 1 draft recap, but this is Rotom-Heat. Really cool. I'm really excited for it. I haven't used it shiny before, but it's NCL, so it's going to be shiny. There you go. Rotom-Heat's a great pivot. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the best fire stab, but it's a great defensive typing. Electric and fire is actually a really solid defensive typing. It resists things like flying, it resists things like fire, it resists things like grass really well, it resists things like fairy. What else is it? It's a steel resist. It's a 4x steel resist actually, which is really good. That covers up my huge steel weakness in Sylveon and Alolan Ninetales. Alolan Ninetales obviously being 4x weak to steel, Sylveon just being regularly weak to steel. Rotom-Heat can come in and soak those hits just as well as Melodic can, but maybe a little bit better than Melodic can actually. It's the best Scizor check in the game, in my opinion, because of the 4x steel resist. Outside of something like, I don't know, Tapu Lele, which can just block the priority from Bullet Punch, and then like Oko with HP Fire or something. I think Rotom-Heat's a huge part to this team. It's a really good pivot, which is my favorite thing in draft format, is drafting pivots, and that's sort of where I went with. Now, if you watched the NCL draft speculation video, you'll know that Jay's plan was to draft only things under base 100. So in round 7, I picked something that I wanted to grab. It synergized with the team really well, and I wanted it for a while, but it was under base 100. So I felt really pressured to grab it now, especially because I know Magic has been known to draft multiple weathers before, and there were still other Hail Setters there. He hasn't taken a Mega yet either. He could have drafted something like Mega Abomasnow. He could have drafted something like Aurorus, something like Vanillux. So those were all still there, and I wanted to grab the Premier Hail Sweeper. So we ended up grabbing Alolan Sandslash in round 7. This is our tier 4 pick. You can see it run Snowcloak. I've seen it run Snowcloak one time by accident, unfortunately, by Jed against Phil in the AABL. I thought it was actually pretty funny that it ended up working out in his favor. He ended up dodging a Thunder Wave, which could have come in clutch later in the game, but it's mostly a Slush Rush Sweeper. It's another physical threat along with Kommo-o. It's not the best physical threat along with Kommo-o, but it's another physical wall along with Kommo-o potentially as well. It does have 2 4x weaknesses that I don't have super well covered at this point. It's got a 4x weakness to fighting, which my only resist to fighting at this point is Mew, which is not great. And it's got a 4x weakness to fire, which I can cover with Rotom-Heat, Melodic, and Kommo-o relatively well. I've nicknamed this Reynolds because I just saw Deadpool 2, and Ryan Reynolds is my favorite actor. Solid, good Canadian kid. Shoutouts to anyone who actually gets that reference that I just made there, but there you go. Yeah, Alolan Sandslash, it's another Sword Sand setup sweeper on this team behind Veil. I think that's really cool. That's kind of how you see it. I know, if you've been watching Draft League content, then you know that A-Drive's drafted this 2 seasons in a row in NPA. He's drafted the Hail Core 2 seasons in a row now, and I've sort of taken some inspiration from him, as well as my good friend Jed, who's drafted this, I believe, 2 times now. We saw him use this in UPBA Season 1, and we've also seen him use this during this current season of AABL Season 4. I'm a big fan of Alolan Sandslash, always wanted to try it. That's kind of all we were at that point. Round 8, I grabbed a huge steal. We grab our 3rd free pick, and there's no reason that this should have still been on the board, honestly. I think this Pokemon's pretty broken. I've used it before in PCL Season 1. We ended up grabbing Superior. Good old trusty Defog? Question mark. I loved that nickname when I drafted it in PCL, and we're bringing Superior back. It's a grass type to round out our Firewater Grass Core. Oh, I totally forgot to mention the Sandslash was the Steel type to round out our Fairy Dragon Steel Core. Unfortunately, it brought me another Ice type, so I've doubled up on the Ice and the Fairy typing so far. Not the greatest, but now we round out our Firewater Grass Core with Superior. It's a fast Mon at base 113, faster than our Alolan Ninetales, which is really cool. And I think Superior behind Veil can be really solid because it doesn't need setup moves. It just uses Leaf Storm, contrary Leaf Storm, to boost itself up. And behind Veil, that's really solid. Unfortunately, Grass isn't the best defensive typing in the game, but I've seen people like TJ use this to a lot of success in the past, putting it behind screens. And I think putting it behind Veil is exactly the same as putting it behind screens, and it only takes one more turn. One turn less, which means more Leaf Storm boost, which means more sweeps. So I'm a big fan of Superior. I think it's really good. It can function well as a mixed defensive check or like a sub-seed check as well. It doesn't get the best moves in the world. It's another defogger to go along with Rotom-Heat and Mew, so we have 3 removal options at this point. Sandslash was another stealth rocker. I totally forgot to mention that. I've kind of been skipping over that. And I think Superior gets Aromatherapy, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check that real quick. Superior, you get Aromatherapy? Yeah, it does. So I've got another one of those. Technically, Superior also gets Coil, so you can run it as like a Coil Leaf Blade set. Physical set's kind of neat. It gets really good utility and Glare. It actually gets Knockoff in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon now, which I didn't know. We played PCL based on Sun and Moon rules, so I wasn't entirely sure about that. It also gets Swords Dance. I didn't know that either. That's really cool. So we've got a ton of different options to run Superior behind Veil for any kind of setup set in general. It's got a decent amount of coverage moves for like Z coverage. You know, lots of Dragon, Grass moves. It gets Aqua Tail as well, which is kind of neat to deal with those pesky fire types. And Knockoff, obviously. Big fan of Superior. I don't know if there's really much more to say about that. I think it's strange that it gets Defog, but a Defogger that's not weak to rocks is very useful. Very, very useful. Round 9, I ended up grabbing something. I'm going to apologize to Jed here because he had his eyes on it, but I also had my eyes on it. I was planning on taking it this round. This feels exactly like Mega Beedrill from last season when I sniped Jed on Mega Beedrill, but he graciously said that I could take this pick. Honestly, I probably would have let him take it, but he said that I was allowed to take it, so I did. We grabbed our kind of a cool pick here in Alolan Raticate, or Oh Gosh. I'm not nicknaming it Oh Gosh, but I'm a big Regulator fan as well, and he's an Alolan Raticate fanatic at this point. I think it's a really cool Mon. Hustle is really useful. Gluttony with the Super Berries now is really useful, and Thick Fat overall is useful. Grabbing a Dark type was super useful, as well as a Normal type. Unfortunately, this gives me another 4 times weakness to fighting, which I still don't have covered. Only Mew is my only resist to fighting at this point. So we'll see if we can sort of patch that up a little bit later on in the draft. However, it is a Dark type, so we now have our Dark fighting and Psychic core through Mew, Kommo-o, and Raticate. It doesn't have the best stats in the world, but it gets things like Sucker Punch. It gets things like Double Edge, like Banded Hustle. Double Edge just destroys things. It blows things back. We named this Fred. This is kind of an obscure reference, but if you've ever read any of the Marvel comics, Dr. Kurt Connors is part of the Spider-Man. He's one of the Spider-Man villains, and one of his pet rats is named Fred, so I named it Fred, based on one of the pet rats from Dr. Kurt Connors. Funnily enough, the alliteration, I could go on all day about the alliteration in Marvel and how Stan Lee just screwed everyone's lives up with his alliteration. That's Alolan Raticate. I don't really know if there's any much more to say about it than that. I haven't done a huge amount of research into Alolan Raticate. It does actually get U-turn, which I didn't know, so I need to remember that for sure. It can be a really good utility mon with like Taunt, Super Fang sets. It gets Roar as well. It gets Knockoff now. It's a good Pursuit Trapper as well. I'm a big fan of the idea of Alolan Raticate, and I'm hoping we can use it to a lot of good success this season. It is the Swords Dance sweeper potentially behind Veil. Does get Sucker Punch for priority, which I'm reasonably lacking in right now. So far we only have Mew. Sylveon technically gets Quick Attack. I've used that before once. But besides that, we don't have a whole lot of priority options on the team. We are going to patch that up with our last 2 picks as well. But that's Alolan Raticate. Heading into round 10, I wasn't sure when I wanted to grab this. I could have saved this for the last round, knowing what I know now, but I was scared that Magic was going to snipe this. There were only 3 teams left to pick a Mega. Jay, myself, and Magic, and all 3 of us were in order. I knew Jay wanted to grab his Mega at this point because he was scared that Magic was going to snipe him as well. My Mega might have functioned a little bit better on a Rain team than Jay's potential Mega would, and I wasn't sure what Mega Magic wanted to pick after Corona took Rain from him. Corona ended up drafting Politoed and Mega Swampert in rounds 8 and 9, and so Magic lost out on Mega Swampert because he waited too long to grab it. So we ended up grabbing Mega Pinsir. Now, I've never used Mega Pinsir before. The thing I like most about this on my team is that base 155 attack. We don't have a ton of premier physical attackers on this team. It's mostly special attacking options and a lot of variations, but Mega Pinsir gives a huge physical threat that means that someone has to bring a physical wall or a check to this. I do have relatively good answers to rock types in Melodic and Superior and Kommo-o. They can all deal with rock types really well, and I think Mega Pinsir is sort of covered a lot by this team. Another good thing about Mega Pinsir, and I didn't know this ahead of time, but it does have base 120 defense. Most fighting types will hit you with physical fighting moves, and so my huge fighting weakness on this team is actually kind of patched up by Mega Pinsir. I didn't realize it was going to be this good. Aerialate Return, Aerialate Quick Attack, monstrous attacks. Mega Pinsir is probably one of the better Megas. It went completely undrafted last season. I actually haven't seen it drafted since LET Season 1. This thing is a monster. It's an absolute beast, and I'm really excited to use it. If you notice its shiny form, it looks a lot like Thanos does. If you haven't seen Infinity War, do not worry. No spoilers here. I will not be spoiling any kind of movies, although if you haven't seen Infinity War and you're a fan of the Marvel Universe, it's been a month. What are you doing with yourself? Go see that movie. You need to go see that movie. Thanos has been part of the Marvel Comics, though, since the 80s, so it's definitely not a spoiler to talk about Thanos. If you haven't been following the Marvel comics, then I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you should have in the past, but he looks remarkably like Thanos, and that's why it's nicknamed Thanos. Again, I'm sort of big into Marvel these days, and I've been doing a lot of research into the Marvel Universe myself, watching through the Marvel timeline. I'm almost completely done Phase 1. Actually, I just have the Avengers and Item 47 to watch, and then I'll be done Phase 1. Yeah, Mega Pinsir, huge fan. It's another Sword Stance abuser under Veil. It's a bulk up user potentially as well. It can get things like Aerialate, Body Slam. Gets really good coverage like Earthquake to hit those rock types. Close Combat to hit those rock types. Gets Knockoff now. It's another Stealth Rock user. Potentially poor, but it is another Stealth Rock user on the team. It gets things like Storm Throw, actually, which I didn't know. It gets Superpower, which is basically close combat. In fact, it is close combat, except you're lowering your defense and attack instead of lowering your defense and special defense. I really don't see a reason in that. Aerialate Boosted Facade sounds absolutely nuts to me. X-Scissor is maybe its best Bug Stab, actually, because it doesn't get Mega Horn. So X-Scissor might just be its best Bug Stab outside of Bug Bite. Fury Cutter, yeah, it doesn't really get fantastic Bug Stab, but you're really using Mega Pinsir as a flying type. This sort of covers up a ground weakness that I had going on my team. Before this, my only ground resist was Superior. Now we have a ground immunity. Alolan Sandslash was weak. Any Mold Breaker Earthquake Mon could hit Rotom-Heat. I think Cade has like 2 Mold Breaker Mons or something, or Jay has like 2 Mold Breaker Mons or something like that, so I have to be scared about that. There are quite a few Mold Breaker Mons thrown around into the draft at this point, so we do have to watch out for that, but Mega Pinsir is a good switch into ground attack. Because of not having the Mega first turn, regular Pinsir gets the ability Moxie, so I can pick up a kill with like regular Quick Attack Moxie and then Mega Evolve, and we're already +1, which kind of decimates a lot of teams. Otherwise, we can, have Hyper Cutter or something like that, not be intimidated by something like an Arcanine or a Landorus Therian or something like that, and sort of blow through teams. So that's kind of the idea with Mega Pinsir. I think it's a really solid option on this team. It's really cool. I can play mind games with Corona and his Ditto, whether or not I run Frustration or Return. Who knows what I'm going to run, right? I know MV used Mega Pinsir really well in the last season of GBA. I think it was GBA season 8, I want to say. Season 8? He ended up playing Geo 3 times, and so they had the mind game with the Ditto 3 times. I think Geo actually got it right once. But that's Mega Pinsir. Now our last pick had to be tier 5 because you'll notice we have three tier 2s in our free picks, so that's 360 points. We only had 40 points to work with. Oh, actually, I should talk a little bit about the megas that I was considering but didn't get. So I was considering bringing back Mega Beedrill on the team. Jed actually took it a lot earlier in the draft in round 5, so he could secure it for himself this time. That was fine. I really just wanted a bug type on the team. Bug is kind of good, and a solid U-turner is really solid. Unfortunately, Pinsir doesn't get U-turn, which I think is unfortunate, but makes a lot of sense based on the design. I was also looking at Mega Aerodactyl. I really wanted to try Mega Aerodactyl with just how fast it is, but Phil took it in the same round that Jed took Mega Beedrill. So there was no way we were getting any of those. Again, I could have saved Mega Pinsir for the last round. It would have been a lot flashier of a round 11 pick, based on magic picking Mega Aggron, which I didn't know he was going to do. I thought he could have maybe picked Mega Pinsir to cover up its fire weakness in his rain, potentially. I don't know. But this was kind of the last option that I had as a good tier 1 setup sweeper for my Hail team. Another one I was considering was Mega Gallade. I've used Alolan Ninetales and Mega Gallade together well in the past, but it's doubling up on my fighting and psychic typings. I'm not a fan of that. At the end of the draft, I'm still left with 4 typings that I haven't covered because this next mon doesn't cover any new typings. We're still missing rock, ground, poison, and I can't remember the last one. But we're missing 4 typings still at the end of this draft. Our last pick was Bibarel. I sort of teased this a little bit. Jed figured it out quite ahead of time. I think Bibarel is going to be a monster on this team. Despite the fact that it doubles up on typings, it's a unique speed tier at 71. I think that's really cool. It's faster than base 70s. It's got a decent attack stat at 85 already. Pair that with Simple Swords Dance. If you don't know what Simple does, Simple makes it so that any sort of boosting move doubles the boost. So 1 Swords Dance gets you to +4 instead of, and 2 Swords Dances gets you to +6 instead of it taking 3 Swords Dances to get all the way there. +4 Bibarel coming at you behind Bail, boys. I don't know what to tell you besides that. It's an unaware mon as well, which I didn't know ahead of time. It's another Stealth Rock user, and it's a priority user with Aqua Jet. Bibarel is totally underrated in a regular playthrough of the game. I think it's so much better now that it gets things like Liquidation as part of its moveset. It actually gets Stomping Tantrum as well. Not that it needed it because it could hit everything with Water Stab, but it is a good way to beat Steel types. It has super power. It's actually decent on the special side. It has a horrible special attack stat, but it's decent on the special side. It gets things like Thunderbolt. It gets things like Surf. Maybe that's it actually. It gets Focus Punch, which is kind of cool. Aqua Jet, Aqua Tail, Crunch, Double Edge, Facade, Grass Knot, Ice Beam, Quick Attack. It's another Quick Attack user. It gets Scald, it gets Shadow Ball. I don't know what to say about Bibarel besides that. It's a fantastic setup sweeper, and I'm really excited to use Bibarel on this team. It's nicknamed Beaverman because of... I don't remember the exact episode number, but it's from The Office. Jim's talking about Justin Bieber, and Dwight's like, what's a beaver? What's a Justin Bieber? And Jim's like, it's a crime-fighting beaver. So, anyways, it doesn't make sense. If you get the reference, you get the reference. If you don't, then I'm sorry. I probably totally butchered that, but that's where it comes from. This is our final draft. I think this is a really cool draft. Again, we're missing a few key types. We have, I believe, like 5 Stealth Rock setters. Let me just double-check that real quick. I'll go to my team page on the dock and figure that out real quick. Ladner Lanturn. We have 5 Stealth Rock headers in Mew, Kommo-o, Sandslash, Mega Pinsir, and Bibarel. We have removal options in Mew with Defog, Rotom-Heat with Defog, Alolan Sandslash with Rapid Spin, Superior with Defog, and we have Clerics in Mew with Heal Bell, Cillian with Heal Bell, Alolan Ninetales with Heal Bell, Superior with Aromatherapy, and I want to say I thought something else got it too, but there you go. We have a kind of a huge weakness to fire and fighting. We have 2 4x weaknesses to fire, 2 4x weaknesses to... Sorry, 1 to fire, 2 to fighting. We actually have a 4x weakness to rock in Mega Pinsir. We have a 4x weakness to fairy in Kommo-o, 4x weakness to steel in Alolan Ninetales, and a 4x weakness to ground, potentially in Rotom-Heat. We have an immunity to poison in Alolan Sandslash, an immunity to ground in Mega Pinsir, 2 ghost immunities in Bibarel and Alolan Raticate, 2 Dragon immunities in Sylveon and Alolan Ninetales, and a Psychic immunity in Alolan Raticate. We have 1 4x Grass Resist in no, not Rotom-Heat. What is my 4x grass resist? Mega Pinsir. We have a 4x grass resist, or sorry, a 4x fighting resistant Mega Pinsir, a 4x ice resist in Alolan Sandslash, a 4x steel resist in Rotom-Heat. We sort of patch up a few things, and I don't want to go too in depth with this because I know Jed and Austin are going to do a draft breakdown of my team on the NCL YouTube channel. I will link the NCL YouTube channel down in the description of this, as well as the music, like I always do. This is a solid team. I'm super excited for this team. We have a ton of different abilities. The only shared ability I think we have is Snow Cloak and Cute Charm, which, you know, who knows if I'm ever going to bring those. Worthy to note, Bibarel is not allowed to get Moody. Bibarel does have Moody as a third ability. We're not allowed to use Moody in this league because it's random boosts, and I'm not a fan of that. I think in terms of our average stats, we ended up patching up quite a few things. We had a very special presence at the beginning, and we ended up sort of neutering that a little bit, and we have a decent attack stat at base 87 now, decent defense at base 92 now, decent speed at base 87 average, so I think that's really cool. Unfortunately, our fastest mon is base 113, however, our slowest mon is base 60, so I think there's a good sort of gap in there. We cover a lot of really good speed tiers that we might not otherwise hit. Something like Raticate can outspeed something like Nidoqueen, for example, something like Bibarel can outspeed something like Skarmory, for example, so that's sort of what they're there for. And we'll move on to the last slide here. Sort of a speculation, but I thought this might be a neat way to wrap up the slide deck. I was the Season 1 runner-up. Can we become the Season 2 champion? Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you would like. I'm very excited to kick off NCL Season 2. I hope most of you are excited to kick off NCL Season 2 as well, and I'm hoping for another successful season. If not, my goal is to make playoffs, and that's sort of where we're going to be at. Don't forget to check out the NCL YouTube channel, and I'm actually going to link Jed in the description as well because he made all these fantastic graphics. He actually made my logo. He redesigned my logo into what it is now as well, so I have nothing but good things to say about Jed. Link to him in the description, link to NCL in the description, link to the music will also be in the description as well. Don't forget to check out the NCL YouTube channel. There's going to be a lot of good content coming up on that channel. I have a few shows that I'll be running. Austin has a few shows he'll be running. Jed has a few shows that he'll be running. It's going to be fun. This is going to be great, and I look forward to a fantastic NCL Season 2.